right, welcome back. Goodman versus Gottlieb. I believe today's Thursday edition. And make sure you scan that QR code in your screen to send us your videos and your questions. Give us a follow on Instagram at Watch Stadium. Doug, last night, the UConn Huskies solidified their spot as the #1 team in America. Why? They absolutely destroyed a Creighton team that a lot of people thought would be a Final Four contender. The big man, Clingan, came back, Donovan Clingan, and came off the bench. He scored 6 points in 16 minutes, but, man, he looked pretty healthy. He was diving on the floor, grabbing boards, trying to push it a little bit. Doug, is UConn, now that you've seen him with Clingan back healthy, are they the #1 team and the favorite for you going into March?
Wow. Yeah. I think they're the favorite. Look, we do this thing with our brain where we're like, well, will this UConn team beat last year's UConn team? And you know what? It doesn't matter because they don't actually have to beat last year's team or any opponent from previous years. They only have to beat the teams in front of them. But kind of go through all these teams and try to figure out who could win it all, right? And they all have some sort of fatal flaw. I think the flaw to UConn would be, the one guy who can really break down a defense, the one guy who can be a difference maker athletically outside of all of their stuff and their shooting and their spacing and their incredible ball movement is just a freshman. That's like their flaw, right? And I don't think they don't have a Jordan Hawkins from last year. They have probably more overall shooting and scoring, and they're maybe a better team, although they're really good last year. And I still have the fears of playing small against them. I think could affect them, although they've shown the versatility without Donovan Clingan to win. But they lost to Kansas, who I think is a national championship contender, by like a bucket at Fog Allen. I feel like on a neutral court, they'd be favored right now. I think they present a lot of problems for Purdue, who's another kind of favorite. I like Carolina, but I don't think that – I think they're better than Carolina. I think Carolina is impressive defensively and a nice team, but I don't think they're better than UConn. So, yeah, I'm kind of going through it in my brain. Like I watch Arizona, and Arizona's playing two bigs, and they're okay. They're good, but there's not a lot of jaw-dropping. So, and then there's Kentucky, who I love the way they play, but with all of that youth taking so many shots and, they just kind of patch it together inside. Yeah, those are the other best teams, other most likely teams. Then, yeah, I'd say UConn is the favorite because they're really well coached. They play really hard, very physical. They can play big. They can play small. They can beat you a bunch of different ways. And, last night in a game where they had to score in the 60s to win, they looked really comfortable. And they won that game because of their defense, not because of their offense. And that's a special thing to be able to do.
Yeah, I trust them. I guess I just trust them more than Purdue, and not necessarily because of the loss in the first round last year, but that's got a little bit to do with it. I mean, like UConn won the whole thing last year, and I know they're both different teams, and Purdue got bounced in probably the biggest upset in NCAA tournament history. That's got to account for a little bit. But again, I think what you said is true, and you went through it kind of in your head there, but you got to it at the very end, which is they can outscore you, and they can also beat you in a grinder. And there's not too many teams that you can say that about, right? And they play hard all the time. That's one thing that a Danny Hurley team, they're not going to have too many lackadaisical games where they don't give A-plus toughness and effort. And I think you know what you're going to get out of Caravan and Cam Spencer and Tristan Newton for the most part, right? Like Clingan still, we got to see him stay healthy. But he doesn't have to give you that much offensively. I think we thought he'd be a force on both ends of the court. He doesn't really need to be a force on the offensive end, but he's got to be a force, and he is when he's in the game defensively.
Well, I agree with you and disagree with you. Like, you don't need to throw the ball to him at the block and him to get you 25. But his presence, his finishing ability, he's a very good rim roller as well as rim protector. that opens up, like, you can run all the best ball screen stuff you want. You can run all last night because of Kalkbrenner and the way they play, where he's constantly in the drop. They ran a bunch of different kind of flare screens and rescreens, and it just beautiful execution of a game plan and of some of their offensive sets. But like, he does put pressure on the rim on offense, and that's really important. Really important.
Sure.
Because when you face Zach Edey, when you face any of these like quality rim protectors, you need somebody who they have to pay attention to. You can throw it to him, or you can get it off the rebound and put it back in. So I generally agree with you. But yeah, I mean, think of how it changes them defensively. You and I talked about it last night with Rob Doster on Field of 68 right here on Stadium, which is, if you watched, they play differently when he's in the lineup and not in the line. With Donovan Clingan, you can play in the drop. And what that forces, it forces those mid-range runners, which analytics tell you that's what we want you to take. Now, they can also switch 5 when they bring them out, okay? Or they can hard hedge and rotate. So they have multiple ways of playing you and matching up with you. And again, like, let's compare it to Purdue. When Purdue doesn't have Zach Edey, they're just not the same basketball team, right? No. Nothing kind of works the same. And Zach Edey is a better scorer than Clingan. Probably not, despite the number of blocks he's had. He's not the rim protector Clingan is. But I really think playing without him because of injury has helped them develop a confidence where when he's out, okay, like, we don't love it, but we can still win. And if we've seen anything about NCAA tournaments, whether it's injury or foul trouble, like, you're probably going to be without your big guy, or maybe even matchups, injury, foul trouble matchups. You're going to have to play without your big guys. And this last month has really helped kind of UConn establish a confidence that they can play with them. We know that. And they can play without them.
Yeah, and I think it helps, again, that Samson Johnson and Donovan Clingan are so different, right? I mean, that's kind of what you pointed to here and how they play. All right, let's look at the Big East as a whole now, because I think it's fair to say if we think UConn is the favorite to win the title, they are a clear step ahead of everybody else in the Big East right now. We didn't think that was necessarily the case going into the year, but, Marquette's been good, not great. Seton Hall's been great, but again, they're still kind of Seton Hall, and I'm not sure I completely buy them. We saw Creighton get blasted. Villanova's been Jekyll and Hyde all year, and the Johnnies are coming along, but I don't think anybody sees them as a serious threat to win this league. Bunch of good teams, not great teams after UConn. I trust Marquette, maybe again, not to win the whole thing, but I love their backcourt. And if Oso plays the way he did the other night, yes, I think they're a team that can kind of beat just about anybody in the country. But other than that, I'll tell you what, I think it's a bunch of teams that could lose in the first round, maybe get to the Sweet 16, but not much further than that.
Well, Villanova, I think it's going to depend upon some health. Let's see how Villanova, what they look like. I like them a little bit more than you do. I think, Creighton, there's a lack of depth there and a lack of kind of ability to kind of get in the lane athletically outside of
they can't break it down. Yeah.
No, they have one guy that can break it down.
And even Alexander, Doug, even Alexander, the problem with him is, I feel like in big games, he just doesn't show up enough for me. He just doesn't show up.
Well, here's what I think it is. I think, the two biggest moves in basketball that are the hardest for people to deal with. 18 inches moving from assistant coach to head coach. That's a hard thing. And moving up from third on the scouting report to top of the scouting report. That's you're going to have a dog on you. And it's not a knock on Baylor Shireman, but Baylor Shireman, basically it's just don't lose connection with him, make him take twos, make him go to his right hand, kind of hope he misses sort of thing. But Baylor Shireman, who's constantly in motion, they run a lot of things for, you don't have to have a plus defender on, whereas Trey Alexander, you do. So I agree with you, but I think a lot of that is the move in the scouting report. And look, they really have, Mason Miller starts he's their fifth starter, and he's only a sophomore. I think he's going to be a really good player. I just don't think he has the confidence. They have the confidence in him, and he knows who he is yet. So you're kind of playing 4-on-5, right? And they're limited in that they have to have Kalkbrenner, but they can only play one way with Kalkbrenner. Right? Like, again, here's the difference. In if they take him out, it's total house of cards. You can go right to the rim and score. They're not good enough defensively.
Right.
As opposed to UConn, they take Clingan out, and now you bring in a quality athletic defender. They get after you. They're a little bit different. So anyway, in summation, I mean, look, we didn't see Marquette on that. You lose your first best guard off the bench. That's going to hurt you. Obviously, again, you talk about top of the scale. Providence loses Bryce Hopkins. That's gonna hurt them. So we thought there were like a couple of tiers in the Big East. I feel like there's UConn tier 1, and then there's that glob right there in the middle, right? And I would put Seton Hall and Nova, and frankly Marquette probably at the top, but they haven't played to their capabilities, And then we got to figure out the rest. Like, we know DePaul's at the bottom. Butler feels somewhere in that third tier, kind of second tier. They were playing above their level for a couple weeks. And they feel very Big Ten-ish in that one team you really like, and the rest of the teams are, okay, they're good, they're fine, they're tournament teams, but they're not special.
One team that might be special is number 8 Kentucky. They beat Mississippi State last night, 90-77. Antonio Reeves, it was kind of his turn, right? He had 27 and 4. Dillingham was efficient again. Trey Mitchell had another solid game. I just feel like they've had a couple stumbles throughout the year. Obviously, UNCW at home. But for the most part, this team has done everything they've been asked to do. And again, they're young for the most part. But Antonio Reeves and Trey Mitchell have helped solidify this team that's kind of fearless and almost doesn't understand that they're not supposed to be doing this. But Reeves has been awesome. And again, listen, I've talked about a little bit of luck, right? Like, you get Reeves back when you thought he was going to transfer. You get Trey Mitchell. Sometimes you need a little luck. And John Calipari got it. He got his 400th win last night at Kentucky. This is a team that I think can go to a Final Four. I don't know if they can win 6 straight, but I wouldn't take them out of the discussion of those teams that can win 6 straight, though.
I thought the win this weekend at Florida was gigantic, more so than beating Mississippi State at home, right? And some of that lack of knowledge, like when you're a freshman, you don't know, like, hey, you're not supposed to win that game. Like, why? Florida's not better than us. Like, yeah, but that's not really how conference play works. I said this again on Field of 68. I'll reference it. I think Tennessee's more likely to win the league than Kentucky is, but I like Kentucky better for the postseason, because the postseason NCAA tournament, there's a lot more freedom of movement. You got to have guys that can bail you out. Now, do I think there can be a little bit too much? When the lights are on, the popcorn's popping, everybody tries to go get theirs. Yeah, but this team hasn't felt like that. They have a rare, and maybe it's because he brings Shepard off the bench and he brings Dillingham off the bench. That it keeps Wagner a little bit more in check, keeps them all kind of in check, because they know, like, if they're not playing well, he's got somebody else who can. And so I like them as well. I like them when you and I sat and watched them in Chicago, and they're continuing to evolve in the right way. Now, just like I told you then, and there have been in the non-conference, there's going to be a no-show at home. There's going to be they're arrogant because they're freshmen. Like, I can't believe that loss. That's the reality to it.
Yeah, they could lose at Vandy, right? They could lose at Vandy, and it wouldn't surprise you at all.
Would not surprise me in the least bit.
But none of this matter. Here's can I go to this? How much does any of it matter? If Kentucky finishes first, then they win the SEC. If they finish 4th in the SEC, does any of that really matter now? Because ultimately, all it's going to come down to, Doug, if they lose, now again, it's for seeding. They want to get a number 1 seed, but let's say they, for argument's sake, they get a 2 or 3 seed. And they lose again in the first weekend. Let's say they win the first round game. They don't get upset, but they lose in the second round. What's it going to be like in Lexington, Kentucky about John Calipari? Because to me, you could have the greatest regular season, but it doesn't matter for Big Blue Nation. Like, you got to get them to the Final Four again, or at least the second weekend, don't you?
Yes. That's the job, and he knows that's the job. And I would say that, like, look, Cal has been, I don't want to say slow to evolve, but like this is different, and he's had transfers that have worked differently, right? Like his success there has been, hey, go out and get the 5 best incoming freshmen, and then you have 1 or 2 kind of returners to help with your culture. And, that's how he won his national championship there. Well, the world has changed. You're losing of the top 10 players. 1, not every year are the top 5 players good enough to really help you. 2, remember, college basketball is older because we still have, 1 more year of COVID kids, so you're going against 24, 25-year-old guys. Like, that's hard. And 3, you have Ignite, you have Australia and New Zealand, you have Overtime Elite, you have some different ways in which, you're losing probably 5 guys a year. And you've seen some of the top recruits in the country go to Auburn, go to Alabama, go to other places and see success. So the world has changed. So you have to, it's hard to tell a Kentucky fan, hey, it's different than it used to be, right? It's different than it used to be. So I think in Cal trying to figure it out, he's done a really good job. But again, can you believe that they didn't get a Hunter Dickinson? If it was a bidding war or if it was about going to the NBA, how can you?
No. Here's what it was. He was scared to play with those freshman guards because he wasn't sure if he would ever see the basketball.
Understood. Right. And I would have agreed with him, right? Because you have Kansas got the truest point guard who's won a national championship, and they get him the ball. I get it. But what I'm saying is that if you're a Kentucky fan, you can't fathom a world in which the best players, it's a bidding war and it's Kentucky. Dude, we won these wars back before there was NIL, right? So the world has changed. And I think the big step that you and I see offensively, they've evolved. That's big for John Calipari. Not just running floppy every time down the court, right? And he's tried to evolve on the recruiting. Who do I retain? Antonio Reeves. Who do I let go? Who do I bring in? How do I coach him? He's never been afraid to coach guys, and how he's coaching Wagner, I think, is amazing. I mean, you've got to be a Hall of Famer to take a guy with that sort of reputation and that sort of history with his dad and not play him 35 minutes and just let him go and let him take 25 shots a game. So I actually think Cal's doing an amazing job, regardless of where they finish. But if they don't get to the Sweet 16, oh yeah, it's going to be, it'd be DEFCON 5, just like you're seeing with the Dallas Cowboys when they lose.
Coming up, it's time for buzzer beaters. We pick some winners tonight and tomorrow. Fade us or tail us. You decide. That's next on Goodman versus Gottlieb. All right, we had Kevin Durant courtside last night for USC Arizona. You probably wanted to see this guy, his buddy LeBron's son, Bronny James. Bronny got the start, had 11 points, 5 rebounds, and 6 assists in 30 minutes, but USC loses again. Arizona gets 20 from Caleb Love, and they bounce back and get the win 82-67. So, as we saw, Arizona with a pretty good bounce-back win over a decimated and struggling USC team. Another team with a good bounce-back win after a couple losses was Houston, Doug. Jamal Shead was fantastic. 29 points, 10 assists. I think he's one of the most underrated players in the entire country. And Houston absolutely waxed Texas Tech. Number 25, Red Raiders. They beat them by 23 points, Doug. So Arizona, Houston, both look like top 5 teams for the most part at one time or another this season. Which one of these teams do you like more moving forward?
I like Houston.
Why?
And a couple things. They have an elite shooter that hasn't really gotten it going yet in Big 12 play.
True.
And as you pointed out, Boswell's been struggling a little bit. And like Jamal Shead's not a 30-point-a-night guy, but I think they're better at the point guard spot, to be honest with you. And I just think Houston will improve offensively, but they have a level of tenacity defensively, a versatility defensively that Arizona just doesn't have, Caleb Love has been a better version of himself, but I do feel like his default is he can be selfish. And especially when the games get close and get important, hey, I've done this. I've been here before. I'm going to take over. I'm going to do it myself. I don't love that. I like it better with this team. Yeah. Yeah, I guess. So, yeah, I'm going to say Houston.
Rightfully so. Yeah, rightfully so. I mean, again, Caleb can – it's funny. There's 2 guys – that are very similar to me. I don't know how much you've watched Wade Taylor from A&M, but I think Wade Taylor and Caleb Love remind me of each other in a lot of ways. Again, they can give it and take it away. And that's hard to feel good about in the NCAA tournament. They can get you there like Caleb Love did a couple years ago, and then they can get you knocked out. Now, again, I think Arizona would take it into a Final Four like what happened to Carolina. But I just don't know if I completely trust them, and it's kind of a combo, right? Caleb Love and Boswell. I trust Shed. He's going to be steady. He's not going to have too many of those 29-point nights, like you said. But L.J. Cryer is also not going to go through these stretches like he has the last 3 or 4 games where he can't really make shots. Their defense is ridiculous. Now, again, Arizona's tougher than they've been. They're not soft. They're not.
I know you never heard me say that they were soft. It's some of it is in the type of athletes that they have, right? Like their bigs are big, and they're physical. I mean, honestly, they would be great in the Big Ten, But I think again the level of athleticism that Houston has, and they have some good size, and they board like crazy. I just think they're more athletic defensively and can do more things, can take you out of what you want to do more. Again, Arizona is not what they had been. When you had Kirk Reese as your point guard, like there's just not a lot you can do to change how somebody else plays. Boswell's better, but he's not Shed. They're not these Houston's got some dogs, man, and that's going to win you a game or two that you shouldn't win. So,
all right, time for buzzer beaters.
I think the offense will get better. Go. Yeah.
Let's get a buzzer beaters quickly. Interesting one. Illinois, again, without Terrence Shannon Jr., starting to struggle lately, goes to Ann Arbor. Michigan coming off a big win with a Fab 5 in attendance. Can they win another one and get this thing going under Juwan?
Well, remember, Doug's back. He only plays home games. It's the weirdest suspension ever. I just haven't seen anything that tells me they're going to be consistent. So I'll go with Illinois.
I'm going to take Michigan here. All right. Minnesota at Michigan State, 11.5-point favorites, the Sparty.
I think it'll be
take
closer than
Sparty
11.5,
to cover.
but I'm gonna take Sparty, but I'll take Minnesota to cover.
Last one, Oregon at Colorado. Colorado, healthy and a 5.5-point favorite. Who you got?
Colorado big. Colorado big. I like that Oregon's not. Yeah, Colorado big. When they're healthy, Colorado's good. They're a true number 2 in that league.
All right, we'll see you tomorrow. Goodman versus Gottlieb. Thanks for joining us every day, 1 Eastern Stadium.